Hi friends, and thank you for coming to my channel again. Today I want to do a tag. The tag I'm going to do today is the last 10 books tag. I saw this tag on Steve Talks About Books and Stuff. It looked like a lot of fun, so let's get started. The first question on here is the last book that you did not finish. The last book I did not finish was Neuromancer by William Gibson. I got about halfway through and I just couldn't make myself go any further. I did not like the book. There were some aspects of it that I thought was interesting. I could see how there's a cult following for it. It just wasn't for me. I didn't like the writing style. There just wasn't much to the story that interested me, and a lot of it I didn't even understand what was happening. There is a live discussion that I did with Steve Talks About Books and Stuff and Ruiz, and I will link that live video in the description below so you could check out and see what we all thought about it. I think I cared for it the least, and of course I was the only one that DNF'd it. But anyway, let's move on to the next question. The second question is, what is the last book that you reread? Actually, the last book I reread is The Return of the King, which is the last book in the Lord of the Rings trilogy. I started this reread back in the last half of last year. I can't remember, but I think I read The Fellowship of the Ring and The Two Towers kind of back to back towards the end of the year. And then The Return of the King, I finally got back into the trilogy and finished The Return of the King in January. And this book is, in my opinion, the quintessential fantasy. And I know there's probably a lot of you who might disagree, but I think that if you read fantasy, you really have to read The Lord of the Rings. And for me, this will always be a 5-star book. I think it is written extreme. It's just, the world building in this story is amazing. I'm not going to go into a whole lot because if you've read it, you know. If you haven't, then read it. So that's all I'm going to say about The Lord of the Rings. But this is the last book that I reread. The next question is, what is the last book you bought? Actually, I just did a weekly reading wrap-up or update video, and in that video I talked about my last book haul, so I will link that video below so you can check it out. So I'll briefly go over the 3 books that I bought. The first one is The Bone Shard Daughter by Andrea Stewart. Then I bought, the same day, I bought The Only Good Indians by Stephen Graham Jones. And the third one is A Court of Thorns and Roses by Sarah J. Maas. I'm actually rereading this with my friend Brandy, and I look forward to it. I think it might be my first romance fantasy, but I'm not sure if that's true. I do not know a whole lot about it, but I'm excited to get to it. Let's see what the next question is. Number 4, what is the last book you lied about reading? Well, you guys are really going to get me to tell the truth today. I didn't lie about reading this book, but I did lie about finishing it, and that is Alice in the Wonderland. I did not like this book, and I don't remember how far I got into it, but I really struggled with reading it. I think it might be because I didn't really agree with the message and the theme that the author was trying to get out. I know that the story is an allegory, but I don't know if it wasn't that I didn't agree, or maybe it just went over my head, but I finally gave up. But whenever I read or do any of those surveys where they ask you how many of these, classics you read, I do check Alice in the Wonderland off as being read because, I tried. What's the next question? Oh, the last book you wrote in the margins. Okay, so this is the question that I really wanted, is the reason why I wanted to do this tag, because I wanted to get the opportunity to talk about my favorite book of all time. And that is The Shadow of the Wind by Carlos Ruiz Avon. This book, as you can see, I've tabbed it all up. I even have a legend so you can see, so I can tell what the themes are for each of the tabs on here. I know, I'm organized. But I wrote in the margins on this. I actually I tabulated this book, and I bought a second copy. When I reread this, I tabulated the second copy as well so that I could send it to my niece. So I'll hopefully be sending that to her soon. And let me show you an example of where I wrote in the margins so you can kind of see. It's in pencil though. I don't even know if it'll show up. But here's an example. But anyway, this book I love. It's about a young man named Daniel. When he's 10 years old, he wakes up terrified that he's forgotten his late mother's face. And his father takes him to the cemetery of forgotten books, where he picks out a book that he is now responsible for reading and holding it and cherishing it. And he reads it and he loves it. And so like all of us readers, when we read a book we love, we go and search for more books by that author. Only he finds out that all the books by that author have been destroyed by a mysterious person. And so it's a coming of age story, but along with him growing up is him in search of what happened to Julian Carax, which is the author's name of the book that he picks up in the Cemetery of Forgotten Books. And so the story is about Daniel growing up, but it's also about the story of Julian and what happened to him, how he got to be the author that he is, and what happened to him after he wrote these books, and why are all of his books going missing. And I just think it's amazing. It's written so beautifully. It is a historical fiction. It takes place in 1945. 1945 is where the book starts, but like I said, it is a coming of age. So I think there's 15 or 20 years that are covered in the book, and there are some things that you're told about in the past. So as Daniel finds out more about Julian, you do read some parts of the story from Julian's life when he was younger. And so I just think it's great. I can't say enough good things about it. If you haven't read it, I honestly think everybody should read it. And it's got romance. It's, like I said, historical fiction. It's a coming of age story. It is beautiful, and I don't think there's a person out there that can't find something in this book that they would enjoy reading. So I highly recommend, if you haven't already read this, to pick it up now. And I'm only saying this because it is my favorite book, and if nothing comes out of this tag except you reading this, then I have won. All right, let's move on to the next question. The next question is, what is the last book you had signed? Actually, the last book that I had signed is Network Effect by Martha Wells. This is the 5th book in the Murderbot Diaries, and Martha Wells was signing books, but her book signings got canceled because of COVID, but I was still able to get a copy of it signed by her, and I was really excited. It's a sci-fi series about a android, I guess you could call her. I say her even though it is a it. But anyway, I really enjoyed the series. I enjoyed this installment of the series, and if you like sci-fi, I think you'll like this. It's funny, it's adventurous, it's really, really good sci-fi series. So let's go on to the next question. Oh, what is the last book you lost? I don't know. Honestly, is this something that happens a lot for people? I don't want to sound like I'm, trying to talk down to those who often lose their books. I mean, I guess if there's an accident and your book gets destroyed, but when I think of a book that's lost, I think of you put it down and you walked away and, oh, I don't know what happened to it. That doesn't happen to me. My books are my babies. And if I leave a book, that's akin to me leaving a toddler somewhere and to fend for itself. And, shame on me if that happens. So the only thing I could say that might be related to this is that not long ago I lost my Bluetooth headphones. I left them somewhere. Wasn't able to get them back, and so for a whole 24 hours while I waited for Amazon to send me a new pair, I couldn't listen to audiobooks, and it was devastating. So, that's close enough. Next question, number 8. What was the last book you had to replace? Actually, the last book I had to replace is The Shadow of the Wind by Carlos Ruiz Cephalon. As I just talked about before, I reread this so that I could tabulate it. But my copy, at the time that I wanted to reread it, I had lent it to a friend, and she did return it. But when she returned it, she was a friend from work, and I left it on my desk at work, kept meaning to bring it home, and never did get to bring it home. And then COVID happened, and now it is still sitting on my desk. I haven't yet been able to go to the office to get it, so I decided to pick up another copy of it, and that's the last book that I had to replace. Did I have to replace it? Probably not, but now I have 2 pretty copies of my favorite book. Next question. What's the last book you had an argument over? So I wouldn't say an argument. Now, Steve said the same thing. We don't argue over books, and I don't think I've ever had an argument over a book. But the closest thing I can think of is a disagreement that I had with my husband. So it was about the Stormlight Archive series by Brandon Sanderson. I read the first 2 books, and I just loved them. And I had to tell him, you got to read these books. He read Mistborn. He really liked Mistborn. And so I said, if you like Mistborn, you've got to read this series. It's just amazing. You'll love it. It's epic. It's great. It's all the things that Mistborn has, but better. And so he read the first 2 books. And I have to give him credit for that, because then he told me they weren't all that great. Like, seriously. He was like, they're okay. I was like, okay. He's like, yeah. So that was our argument. Now I don't recommend books to him anymore.
Maybe you should.
Fine. Good.
Great.
Do you want to go to our place and make out?
Does Stephen Hawking roll through the quad?
Just kidding. All right, so the last question on here is, what's the last book you couldn't get a hold of? I didn't think I was going to have something to talk about for this one, but actually I remembered that Elliot Brooks had recommended a book called The Ninth Reign by Jen Williams. And that book is not printed here in the United States, so I had to purchase it from a book depository. And when I did, they did have the first book, but they did not have a copy of the second book, which is The Bitter Twins. And the name of the series is, I think it's called The Willowing, oh, it doesn't say on here. But the second book was out of print, or I shouldn't say out of print, it was sold out. And it was sold out at every website that sells UK printed books and ships to the United States. So I actually had to get on a email waiting list for them to send me an email when they had them in stock again, and I literally stopped what I was doing and ordered it so that I could get this copy. And you know what, even after all that work, I still haven't read the first book. I will though. It was on my May TBR, but a lot of books on my May TBR are kind of falling off because Steve and Brandy keep adding stuff to it, so it's all their fault. But anyway, that is the last question, and I had a lot of fun with this tag, and I hope you guys enjoyed watching. So if you have any questions about the books that I read, want to know more about them, let me know in the comments. I'm going to tag Jessie from the Caffeinated Bookworm. So Jessie, you're it, and thank you all for watching.